Welcome back, college hockey fans. It's another episode of MNCAA with our NCHC crew again. It's Max Veech along with myself, Nick Maxson. Max, some positive news finally for Bulldogs fan this week, and some shuffling up and down the NCHC board. We'll touch on all those things, plus take a broader look at college hockey as a whole. We're not quite ready to talk pairwise yet. We're still a little early. But we are starting to see some teams take shape. I do think there's some tidbits throughout the college hockey world that we'll touch in, more news and tidbits than anything. But with that being said, Max, so let's start with the only one of our two teams that were in action this weekend. I guess St. Cloud had a bye week. Duluth, though, looking for a bounce back, and they got it in a pretty impressive fashion. Granted, impressive, maybe, shall we say, a bit of a different words some others would use, maybe not. You beat Miami, you get the sweep. Again, Miami's better. Again, are we seeing maybe the goals against, the goals for maybe not reflect just yet, but they're still a stingy team, but you took care of business on home ice this last weekend?
Yeah, I mean, you just mentioned right off the bat there, the pairwise. Normally people are like, pairwise doesn't matter until the next calendar year, which I generally agree with. But don't get me wrong, I'm gonna start tinkering with it and looking at it, just kind of keeping a side eye on it as Christmas approaches. But I'll say this right now, it means absolutely nothing prior to Thanksgiving, and I don't think that anybody else that's a college hockey fan or a long-standing one at that point would argue with that either. So. I think it is fun to kind of speculate. I've seen people for the first year, maybe it's just because it's the first year I've been paying attention, but I have been seeing people put out the playoff seedings and forecasts.
Oh, jeez.
Every week, like after week 2 or 3, they started doing it, and I'm like, well, that's insane as well. But it's fun. You know, I'm not gonna piss in anybody's Cheerios and take away, because I partake in that once we get to the last 5-6 weeks of the season as well. So I'm excited that it's getting a little bit more national attention, regardless of how silly I find parts of that to be. But talking about things that I enjoy, last weekend was another one of those. I mean, we're talking about a week ago or 6 days ago now. We had mentioned that UMD had the opportunity in front of them for a bounce back week. They did take advantage of that. You had noted that many people are going to point to it being wins against Miami. They were convincing wins against Miami. Good teams win convincingly. And, I think at the end of last week's episode, I had said and stated and was emphatic as I could be, this is a good hockey team. They just need to play like it. They played like it. I don't think there's anybody that's going to say that there was any doubt in any one of these games, at least, the majority of these games. We'll get into Saturday's debacle at the beginning. But as far as Friday goes, that's as good as I've seen this UMD team play a complete 60 minutes all season. And everybody's going to say that when you shut somebody out 5-0, those shutouts are hard to come by, even against a team like Miami in the NCHC. Those feel good when you can get them. I'm glad Guyon finally got his first NCAA shutout, and I would say he deserved it. He probably deserved it for some of the other teams that we had played as well. I think the Stonehill goal in one of those games was a tipped flutter that was a rainbow, went over everybody and kind of fell in the back of the net. That was another game he probably should have had one. But regardless, he finally got it. Monkeys off the back. We don't have to have that type of pressure anymore. They'll just be fun ones from here on out, and hopefully there's more where that came from. But Friday's 5-0 win, 5 goals from 5 different players, 2-1-2 in terms of first, second, and third period goals. They didn't play like they had something to prove, they played like they had something to prove, but didn't play from a hole. So there was no panic. There was no unnecessary urgency and stuff. There was nothing that was forced. So it was good to see them kind of get stuff established, and they pretty much dominated that game. And I've got nothing bad to say other than a major penalty. And on the flip side of that coin, major penalty, they killed off a major penalty as well. So Miami was 0 for 4 on the power play. I think UMD's penalty kill, that's the best they've looked all year, which is encouraging as well. But I'm trying to think of a negative I can say from that game, and there's nothing that's coming to mind right now. But it all came into Saturday. Because they won so big on Friday, Saturday's game started. It was pretty slow out of the gates for both teams. There was a couple of chances one way or the other, but Miami ended up going up two relatively early in that first period there, and UMD felt like they were falling into some bad habits again, at least partially anyway. And I don't know if that was because they took their foot off the gas and they thought it was going to be another easy win, or what the deal was. But long story short, they got it sorted out at the end of the third. They scored 3 goals in 2 minutes in the last 3:30 of the game. So that might be a little confusing the way I worded it. Just suffice it to say, it stopped all momentum that Miami had, and they never really regained it for the rest of the game. UMD goes on to win 7-2. Scored 3 more in the third period or second period and 1 in the third. Neither of these games had an empty net goal, so these were all actual goals with a goalie in net. I would say some of them much prettier than others, but I was really happy to see some of the guys get on the scoreboard that hadn't been there before. Ty Hansen's goal, his first collegiate goal, incredible. I think that was a power play goal there, a one-timer. And the power play ended up working on Saturday. They didn't get a goal in their one power play chance on Friday, but Saturday was a different story. They were 1 for 3 on the power play. Like I said, Ty Hansen's goal was a nice shot. I would like to see him get some more opportunities. I don't think he's going to get first line opportunities, but he's proven that he's able to step up when needed in some of those games as well. But I would say the most crucial pieces to this game, to this series, were the return of Dom James and then Jack Smith as well. Their presence was welcomed with open arms, obviously, and it was just something that just feels different when he's out there. And I know I've mentioned that probably 3 or 4 times over the last 2 years on here, whether I'm complaining that he's gone or happy that he's back with some of the injuries that have taken place, but. That North Dakota series, he was only there for a period, and it absolutely showed in terms of the intensity, face-off wins, and things like that. So having him here and getting these wins, looking like they do, it's great. Great for him, great for the team. It's something to build off of for sure. But the other name that I want to bring up, who's not, doesn't have the seniority that Dominic James does, is the Jason Chagabe. I mean, he's a really key piece of this offense that UMD has going on right now. Second most points on the team, 5 goals, 6 assists, to Dominic James, and he's got 15 with a couple fewer games. But Chagabe is just somebody that seems to be finding himself in the right spots, whether it's passing the puck to the right spots and just having a high hockey IQ in terms of where people are supposed to be and what plays are supposed to be happening if they are set plays. It just goes to show that being smart is sometimes a little bit better and more effective for a team like UMD than it is to be the fastest guy out there, because he's certainly not the fastest player in college hockey, but his IQ has helped him overcome that in terms of just being able to continue to contribute. And I'm looking forward to that continuing on this year, and fingers crossed a couple more years in the future as well. I know he's got NHL draft pick, and he'll have a couple of eyes on him for trying to move on maybe a little bit quicker than others in college hockey. But I think the growth that he's shown since coming out of high school in Warroad to Green Bay, to where he's at right now, is leaps and bounds. And if he's continuing on that trajectory, I think he's going to continue to be a really key piece for UMD and somebody to watch in college hockey.
I want to touch on 2 players in specific, Max, because they got NCHC weekly honors. Adam Gay getting, I believe, was it rookie or was it goaltender of the week? It was one of the 2. Dominic James getting forward of the week.
Yep.
So they're getting noticed, right? And I think, as you mentioned, it's not like per se you needed this weekend, but in a sense, it can't hurt, right? I mean, right. Sometimes, especially for a very young group that the Bulldogs have, it just kind of feels nice that when you can finally get that full weekend, you kind of maybe settle in, you feel good. No, granted, again, we talk about Miami. They're a team that's kind of rebuilding. Again, they're still better than we're off. At the end of the day, you don't get to pick your opponents. You do get to pick, though, how you handle those opponents, right? Saturday, I think, would you say that response Saturday after going down 2-0 Miami, again, talk about a response, right? They get beat up a bit on Friday. They come out, They didn't back down, but UMD was able to, shall we say, take a breath and say, okay, this takes 2 full, games of effort. This takes our best both nights. We need to dig ourselves in and kind of respond to that. I think, in my opinion, that's maybe more of the important piece of the weekend than just the 2 wins. What do you think, Max?
Yeah, absolutely. We're looking at UMD here, and I don't want to compare them to last year's team, but through a similar point in the season, despite what their record is, sub 500, the only losses that they would have outside of Bemidji's overtime is to pretty highly ranked teams. North Dakota at the time of their loss was significantly higher than they are now, but
Mm-hmm.
they're losing to good teams, and I would love to see them get some wins against those good teams. But they're beating some of these teams that they should be beating. So if they can continue on that type of trajectory and start to get one win and split some of those weekends with those top 5, top 10 opponents, it's going to be a really tough task for people to keep overlooking UMD here. And I say that as maybe not facetiously as possible, but I look at a team like Arizona State, and they're getting receiving votes in some of these national polls with a worse record and worse wins and worse losses than UMD. And I just kind of wonder where some of those voters are looking during these games. And I understand that Arizona State's going to get more national attention just because they had an NHL team in their arena a year ago, and they've got a growing program, and they've just moved conferences, and so many different factors going into it. So I understand it, but I think that UMD, just because they've had a couple of down years in a row here, just has some negative connotations or bad press that they have to overcome a little bit, and I think they've got a chance to do that. So, a couple more quality wins, and I think they're going to start to gain a lot more respect.
100%, Max. And you're going to have that opportunity as early as next week. What I want to do is let's just finish up the UMD conversation, and then we'll go kind of a conference look. Western Michigan is your next opponent. They're going to be at your barn at M Soil. They're pretty good, although I'm not sure Western Michigan, yes, they're ranked 9th. I'm not sure many national pundits are really talking about them a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just seems like year after year, they're sort of, I don't want to say overlooked, but they don't really get the attention that I think they deserve. Now, granted, part of, I think, the issue with the Broncos is the last few regular seasons, they've been very, very good. You get to tournament time, and they seem to sort of underperform a bit there. But we're here in the regular season. They've got some great talent. Alex Bump being one of them, again, a Prior Lake native who, shall we say, knows how to put the puck in that. He's a Philadelphia Flyers draft pick. But
originally supposed to go to Vermont, too, with quite a few other Minnesota kids, and ended up switching the commitment there after some of the turmoil out in Vermont. And I think he's certainly found his spot in his game, and all credit to him and that Western coaching staff, because he does look good.
Yeah, he's good. But with that being said, Max, again, the NCHC schedule, we talk about it ad nauseum. There's no weekends off. How do you feel UMD matches up against the Broncos, and what's the key to success?
Yeah, the Broncos, I would say in the last 2, maybe even 3 years, they were killing you with one really solid line or 3 really high producing players. This year, they might not have any of those lines and any of those players. Granted, like we just said, Alex Bump, their top producer, very, very good. 3, 5, and 8 for his stats. You've got Tim Washi is 2, 6, and 8. And then everybody else, there's like 4 or 5 guys tied for 6 points below that. That just goes to show that the depth of their scoring just kind of is a flat line. Every one of those lines is just as potent as the next one. So having UMD's second and third lines out there, winning some of those battles is going to be the most crucial thing for them. And when we're talking about overlooking Western Michigan, I can't speak to the last 2 or 3 years because they did have some of those high-flying players who were looking to score more points than anybody in the nation that they don't have this year. But they do have a goalie tandem, so they don't have one standout goalie. They've got 2 great goalies who I think either one of them would be a standout goalie on most other teams in Cameron Rowe and Hampton Slakinski, another kid that was supposed to go somewhere else and ended up transferring after turmoil at the intended program. But they've just got they're spreading the wealth around, and they're not shining a spotlight on any one line or any one person on that team, and that's what makes it easy to overlook. But it also makes them dangerous as a team overall. So I think that is the strength that they have over some other opponents. But I think it matches up well with UMD. UMD, again, they do have Dominic James in that number one clear defined role in terms of the threats on the ice. But after that, you got your Shagabe, you've got your Carter Loney's been going off. Anthony Mangini has 6 points in his last 4 games. They're spreading it around quite a bit as well. And so if they can go line for line and match up and just win a couple of periods, they can find a way to win these games. Whereas some of these other lines, if you shut one line or one guy down, that's where Western Michigan has been finding their success on the year. And 6-1-1 overall, their record is speaking for it. They've got a good goalie, and they've been finding ways to shut those top lines down. So their only real loss is to Boston College, 2-4. I don't think anybody's going to fault them for that. And then their tie is Colorado College, and that's another really good goalie that's got a similar build to UMD with no Laba out or limited capacity in terms of what he's producing for the team there on the practice ice. But I would say that winning some face-offs is going to be a tough stretch because Western does have one of the better face-off percentages in the country. And then just maintaining that puck possession and battling line by line and not trying to put everything or all of the emphasis on one power play unit or one line or anything like that. It's going to have to be a team effort for sure.
100% should be a good matchup between both of those squads again as we get into the thick of conference play. Speaking of conference play, let's take a look outside the NCHC. A little bit, kind of, shall we say, a view from space. How about Denver? Yeah. My goodness. If it wasn't unanimous before, which it wasn't, now it is. Perfect 12-0 on the season after they swept North Dakota. They're a wagon.
Right.
Nobody's surprised. They will... yeah, they're just good. We'll put it that way.
I wonder what people in North Dakota are feeling right now, because when they started the year and they had the wins with BU and against Providence, they've had some pretty high expectations coming into the season. And, obviously second at the NCHC polls and the top 10 for sure team. I don't remember if they were top 5 or not. I think they were just outside that to start the season, but
I think it was 6 or 7, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. So they had some really, really high expectations and thoughts of how the season was going to go. And then the last, 3-4 weeks here, there's been a couple of rough patches. Obviously, they swept UMD in there. I'm going to be eating my humble pie on that. Whatever. I get it. They kind of own us, especially at Amsoil. It's their second home away from home. But they've also got, a couple of losses to Cornell in there. And then they've got some, getting beat down, especially on the Friday game to that Denver team. I don't want to say that North Dakota is panicking. They're still ranked. They're still a really good team. I think they're going to have some good wins, but there's some question marks there about how they match up with some of these top end teams and what that bodes for some playoff expectations as well.
100%. So with North Dakota and that being said, I'm not panicking if you're a North Dakota fan just yet. Now, granted, that doesn't mean that there isn't cause for some concern. They do have, shall I say, an easier weekend as they will take on Robert Morris this weekend as a non-conference bout. But again, it's not the opponent where that's the wins you want, right? Now, granted, they should take care of business, but is it going to help the team prepare for, shall we say, a Colorado College or, those that maybe not, but you kind of feel like there's a morale shift that needs to happen for North Dakota. This may be the weekend for them. I'm again, I don't think that they're a bad team. It's early still. Again, it's only mid-November. But at the end of the day, they're still a good hockey team. I think they'll bounce back. And Denver is just that good. I think the conversation's more of, is Denver really that good? They are. I really do think that they're leaps and bounds. If it were me, it's Denver and Boston College, and then there's a gap between the next tier. If you're talking college hockey teams,
I would say Zeev Buyum is at this point in the season anyway, and it's November 19th at the time of this recording. He's having the best defensive season in terms of point production as well as defensive play in general that I've seen since Cale Makar when he was in college here. And that sounds crazy to say. And, maybe it's me being a little bit of a homer draft pick, seeing him go to the Wild, but I'm looking at him and how he's playing the game there. And it's just on a different level than what I'm used to watching throughout the rest of the NCHC. But even when I'm looking at teams in Hockey East and some of these other spots. It's really impressive to watch.
It really, really is. And my goodness, and everything that I've heard and talking to David Carl at Media Day about Zeev is just his work ethic and his willingness to try to adapt and get better every single day. So we saw the flashes on offense. Again, there was some, shall we say, some earmarks that his defensive game could improve in certain areas. It's nice to see that has taken at least a little bit of a step. Could he go pro after this year? We'll wait and see. Again, it's early, but I do think that he's got all the tools in the tool chest to be at the player of the next level. Thus, the 12th overall pick, as we saw in Vegas this past year, and he rightfully deserved. I'm actually surprised he slipped as low as he did. I thought he was going to be top 10 as a homer pick with you, Max. I'm glad that he did. Him and Faber could be pretty good. We'll put it that way.
If they go back to back, them being Denver, I could see him leaving just because he's accomplished everything that he would want to accomplish at the college level. If they have either an early exit or a crushing defeat in a national championship, there's going to be some rumors that he might want to stick around and try and go for another one. But with the way that everything is looking, or how everything is looking right now, I don't see any reason why he wouldn't be able to push for a quote unquote early exit and try and push to make an NHL roster, depending on how the Wild are doing at the end of the year and where they're at.
I could see the Wild signing him first to his LC, and I could see, depending on the situation they're in, giving him a look like in a bottom six kind of, tin bit. I kind of feel like he's going to take the place of Declan Chisholm at some point with the ZLC. Who knows where they want to burn a year? Who knows, right? The Wild are not going to be as cap strapped too after this season. I think fans have been waiting almost a half a decade plus for this off season upcoming to be here, so that way.
You say they won't be cap strapped, but they already promised that they're going to pay whatever it takes to keep Kirill around, and he is leading the National Hockey League in points. Maybe that's changed since the last time I looked, which is admittedly 7 days ago.
He's not leading. I think it's Nathan McKinnon that's at the top, but cap strapped in terms of money that you can actually spend and use to improve your roster, not to essentially be a cap penalty. So yes, correct. Thank you for correcting me on my yes, Max. With that being said, let's continue to roll here. Colorado College, Western Michigan's opponent this week. It was Western Michigan that took care of business on those. So Colorado College, which is St. Cloud's next opponent, mind you, the Huskies will be in Colorado Springs to face the Tigers, who were undefeated going into this weekend. They're going to have a bit of a chip on their shoulders. And again, that shows that, back to Duluth, Western Michigan can be a good squad, right? They can be sort of a shutdown role there. So watch out for the Tigers. They might be looking to pounce back, if you know what I mean. Yes, I'm here for all the dad jokes. Anyway, as we go down the rest of the NCHC schedule, again, we talked North Dakota getting Robert Morris. How about this, though? Omaha. Man, they finally broke on Friday the 6-game losing streak against the Sun Devils. Unfortunately, the Sun Devils would come back and get a split for the weekend. So Omaha, they just need to find something, man. I'm kind of there's one team that I don't know if disappointed is the word, Max, but maybe a little bit surprised that they've had this rough of a start. To me, it's Omaha. Now, granted, when you look at the roster, does the talent jump out? Not necessarily. They did lose a lot of players, either to the transfer portal or to aging out. And maybe it's youth, and maybe it's just, again, too many new cooks in the kitchen, and they're just having to figure it out. Again, Mike Gabinet's a hell of a coach from what he usually has to deal with. Hopefully they get back on track. But Omaha, it's been a struggle for them to start the season.
Yeah, I would say after coming off of the postseason success that they had last year, and then winning that icebreaker tournament to start this year, the expectations couldn't have been higher. And then immediately after that, it was a long list of losses in there and some really bad ones as well. So they've certainly, I would say, bottomed out, and it's tough to say that, especially when there's no easy games in the NCHC play the rest of the way here. But you couldn't have done worse over a month than Omaha had. I experienced it as a UMD fan last year twice, so I understand what the fan base is kind of going through there, and I think there is enough talent on that team, especially like we said we saw in the first couple of weeks this year, where they will be able to eke out some of these wins and turn things around here. They just needed to get that one off their back. And that Saturday game was close as well. They had plenty of opportunities, but just didn't get the result that they wanted. So tough to see him like that as a UMD NCHC fan. I was really hoping that they would have a couple of more non-conference wins in there so that playing them, whether you won or lost, it meant a little bit more for the national standings, but it is what it is. You got to play the games anyway. And I think they'll be just as good.
100% would agree there. Let's talk more college hockey news as a whole here, Max, because there's some pretty interesting tidbits that I think need to be discussed. Michigan State climbing to number 2 in the national ranking. This isn't really that surprising.
Right.
I know Boston College is good, but Michigan State, to me, I think deserves to be there. Trey Augustine, I know we talk about different goaltenders around college hockey. Cam Fowler being one again for Boston College. I think he's up there in that conversation. But do you think Trey Augustine is a Richter favorite just based on what we've seen? Again, it's early, but I think he's at least in the conversation.
Yeah, I think he was in that conversation to finish off last year as well. There was a couple of bad losses to some Big Ten teams, and that's just a product of that conference in terms of some of the scoring prowess that those teams have and the way that the script of those games go. So it's always going to hurt a little bit for goaltenders in there. But on the flip side of that, there's so many teams like Penn State last year. They were just putting up shots at a record pace for a long time, and none of them were really all that good. They were a lot of shots from the outside, so it can bolster those numbers as well. And I think that his numbers look good because he is also a good goalie as well. So I would expect him to be probably at the top, if not the very top, in the top 3 of that conversation list right now, and to finish the end of the season. You mentioned one of the other ones, Fowler. He's going to have a little bit of time to reflect on some decisions he made this past weekend, and it's going to have a little bit of a blemish on the record if the committee takes that into account in terms of some character that they don't want to see. But Trey Augustine in terms of who I would expect to maybe have a Richter award next to his name in the future is probably a front runner there. And coming out of Michigan State, there's a couple of good goalies you can point to that have followed that same path. So there might be a little bit of history that goes into that nostalgia pick as well.
You're not talking about Ryan Miller, are we? Yeah. Had a heck of a NHL career, did Ryan Miller, over almost 20 years, and now I think is in part of a front office somewhere. It might be with Buffalo, but I have to double check. I know he's doing some, I think, player development type roles in the show essentially. But I want to stick with your Big Ten comment too, because since you talked about scoring, so when St. Cloud played Bemidji State, and I came on here, I said, hey, yeah, St. Cloud won both nights, so watch out. This Bemidji State's actually pretty good. They beat the Gophers this weekend. Mind you, they split the series. But again, they made life difficult for the Gophers. This is what we go back to, 2018? Was that the year of Caulfield? Yes, where I think everybody outside of the Midwest didn't think that it was possible, but yet here we were all saying, yeah, no, Bemidji State this was a matchup I think that played right into their hands. So that is my thing here, Max, and that is Bemidji State. I think they've just shown that it could be a repeat of 2018. Do you agree?
I think Matthias Scholl, when we were just talking about good goaltenders, now they can kind of bolster a team's reputation, does that for Bemidji State. He is a presence in the net that has to be respected by every team that's going out there. He was missed last year when he was gone, dearly. And I think having him back for the majority of games this year, I don't even know if they had a backup playing any of their games so far, is a reason why they've won the games that they have. And I'm not saying that they're playing up to their full potential, because I think the offense has left some on the board in some of the cases that they've had so far this season. But having him as a backstop for that team is a difference maker for sure. And I think that they do have an opportunity to surprise some more teams along the way, especially playing in the CCHA where you can rack up a couple more wins. That doesn't mean it's going to be easy to climb in the, pairwise rankings or national rankings or anything like that, just because quality wins mean a little bit more. But I think they do have a chance to win that conference again. The CCHA is up for grabs for just about anybody right now. I think that nobody has expected it to go as it is currently on trajectory anyway. And Bemidji State has just as good of a chance as anybody in that conference right now to win it all and to play a little bit of a spoiler along the way. And that's scary to say as a UMD fan. We have to play them one more time, I think, in December here, right before the new year. And I'm hoping that they can rack up some wins along the way, so that game means a little bit more. But I don't want them to get too much confidence to make that game tougher on us as well. But yeah, I mean, against Minnesota, you're talking about a team that just kind of frustrated them and forced some turnovers that Minnesota hasn't been used to making all year, especially in their own zone. And that's just a different play than maybe Minnesota has faced before. Maybe just that unrelenting offensive zone pressure. But yeah, credit to the Beavers and what they've put together. I think they are better than their record shows, and they're somebody to look out for. And every weekend I'm going to pick them to split their series. They always seem to do it, no matter who they're playing, and they always finish the year with a 500 record. But I think that just goes to show you they can win on any given night.
I couldn't disagree more with Bemidji State, and again, just a different, like a very veteran team, a very old team that I think just understands the way that they need to play and the way that Sarah Toria wants them to play. It's a unique system for them this year, and I do think it's going to bear fruit, we'll say, throughout the rest of the season. Some more tidbits real quickly here, Max, before we wrap up. How about Cornell? 3-1-2. So does that mean we still get a vote?
No, yeah, I just want it on the record. I was right about Cornell, and I was right to be judgmental of the person that kept them at number 1 before they played a game. Yes, they swept North Dakota to start the season, but it's been pretty much downhill since. And they've tied and lost to some like mediocre teams along the way. And I don't want to say it makes me feel good. I still think they are a good team. I've said that before. I'll continue saying it. I just never assumed that they would be a number 1 team. They are a big team if they are allowed to play their control style and physical style. I expect them to win those games. When there's other teams that force them to play a different way, they may have a little bit more trouble with it. So, yeah, it's interesting at the very least to see how that season has progressed for them, and the fact that they're part of that Ivy League that starts so much later. You're never going to know who they are until we get into those holiday breaks anyway. So.
100%. Yeah, it really is. Speaking of narratives, how about Maine? They're good. 1-1 this past weekend against BU. BC also losing to UConn.
Yeah.
Interesting. Also a suspension coming for Fowler. Speaking of that,
Yeah.
Minnesota State tying Northern Michigan. Again, you talk about blips in the radar. That I don't think anybody had him on theirs for Northern Michigan, who, mind you, lost 3/4 of its roster this past season. But again, Dave Shayak, a former St. Cloud State assistant head coach, knows what he's doing. So was able to rise to the challenge to get a split and tie, I should say, with Michigan State this past weekend. CCHA wins, they're up for grabs. We kind of thought it would be Bemidji State and St. Thomas. And real quick, Max, it might still be that race when we get to the end of the season. But early on, there's some more players at the poker table than maybe we would expect it at this point. Granted, still early in the season.
Yeah, you've got Michigan Tech leading that conference right now through limited conference play, for what it's worth. But they're overperforming what we expected to see out of them as well. And Northern Michigan, going back to that Minnesota State series, they've got one win. They're 1-10-1 or something similar to that on the season. So to get that split tie against Minnesota State is big for them, but tough for Minnesota State to kind of swallow, losing out on some pretty crucial points that they would love to have. I'm sure at the end of the year, when you get into these tight races, I think that was a conference that was won by 1 or 2 points to finish the year last year, and I expect it to be very similar based on how things are going this year as well. So yeah, I would say that St. Thomas could right the ship. They've had a tough start to the year. Lost some of those really, really close games, falling apart in some of the ones that they were leading relatively large in. It's just a couple of tweaks that they're going to need to make from Rico on that side. And that's all it's going to take for it to be, a 3 or 4 horse race in the conference versus the 2 that it's sitting at right now.
And then the final thing that we'll keep our eyes on throughout the course of the season is Atlantic Hockey. It's Niagara that's on top. Bentley is in the number 2. Bentley, yeah, both teams. That was not on my bingo card. But why we talk about it, right, is this the final season for AIC being at the Division I level? We did talk about that last week, Max. So we'd like to see AIC get back into that hunt.
Yep.
Again, still very early, but we'll kind of keep tabs on that as we go. Last thing we'll do, Max, is just to kind of recap next week's kind of schedule and who's playing who. So we'll take a look at the schedule here as it loads on my side, which for those of you who've been paying attention to my computer over the last couple of weeks has not been kind to me. We'll put it that way. It's not been good. But we're getting better, which is good. We already mentioned St. Cloud State on the road against Colorado College. We mentioned Robert Morris going into Grand Forks against North Dakota. Western Michigan, again, going into Duluth to take on your Bulldogs. Miami will be on the road against Omaha. And the other conference matchup will be Arizona State. Will be going to Denver to face the number 1 Pioneers. And I can only imagine that the Pioneers will be probably 14-0 at the end of this weekend. But stranger things have happened, Max, so can't really say we can put a stamp of guarantee on it. Denver, though, has not been a team that we have seen in recent years, especially under Dave Carl, overlook anybody. They just seem to approach everybody the same way, so I don't expect that to go that way. But hockey can be really goofy sometimes. So with that, Max, any final thoughts before we part ways for this week's episode?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it there. North Dakota has their quote unquote business suits that they like to wear and flaunt about. David Carl and his group just takes care of business, and it's week in and week out. Every time that they take the ice, it feels like they're up to the challenge and they're playing their best form of hockey. And some other times, other teams are playing their best, and that's enough to overpass them. But I don't know if they're still undefeated when we get to the Christmas break. I'm putting it on, record watch in terms of wins in the season and breaking some of the National Hockey League NCAA records, both for individual statistics, but also for the team as well, because this team might not have had, the superstars that some teams in the recent past have. I know Michigan has had quite a few. Minnesota's had a ton, and all the hype trains that kind of go around them. Boston College, yeah. And that's not to say that Denver doesn't have those big names, and they do, but just not as many of them. And they're playing a full team game, and it's very impressive.
It really, really is. Forwards, defense, and then their goaltender. Let's not forget Matt Davis, right, who was instrumental in terms of the Frozen Four here in Minneapolis and St. Paul. They might be already punching their ticket. Not quite yet, but it seems like they will be a favorite to punch a ticket, as it will be in St. Louis this year. 2 years, though, Max. I think a lot of more college hockey fans will be punching their airline tickets because it will be in Las Vegas at T-Mobile Arena in 2 seasons. And I cannot wait to see what the pomp and circumstance that they will roll out when it goes to T-Mobile Arena and the Golden Knights. And I think it's UNLV. No, it's North Dakota. I think that's the host. I can't remember, honestly.
I think it's North Dakota as well.
Is it North Dakota? Okay. And it never ceases to amaze, because wasn't Wisconsin that was the host in Tampa a couple years back? Yeah. It's bizarre how they do it. But anyway, I digress from that. So, Max, with that being said, and to all of you listening and watching from wherever you listen to podcasts, thank you very much for watching another episode of MNCAA. And our NCHC crew will see you back here, same time next week.